Today's guest, Catharina Riedl from SAP.
I try to hire for people where I see the need or they're eager to develop themselves and to learn, because I think that's something that is important for an organization at SAP, because we are a company that is constantly changing. And I think you need people that somehow can handle that constant change and that constant innovation. And I think people with a growth mindset are a very good fit to how we as an organization are running. And that's something I always look for in people, that people are, that they have that growth mindset. They want to grow, they want to challenge things, they want to bring in ideas. They're not the ones who, want to do their job A to Z always the same, but that can work and live in an environment that gives a lot of freedom. But I think you also need to be able to use that freedom for yourself. And I think for people that do not have that growth mindset, it can maybe sometimes be very overwhelming and very loose. And therefore, I think that is a good fit for us, people with a growth mindset.
Catharina Riedl, or Kata, is the SAP Germany COO and is running the sales and service organization of around 2,500 people. So it's a quite big scope. Globally, SAP has around 110,000 employees, whereas the biggest market is the US with plus 20,000 employees and around 15 billion in revenue. Total revenue as of 2022 is 30 billion, and EMEA has around 13 billion. And out of these 13 billion, I don't know how much is coming from Germany, but I think it's still huge because it's the second biggest market. And more than 20,000 people are working in Germany for SAP. And the 2,500 people that are run by Kata are in the sales and service organization. And they have a real sophisticated sales organization, which we go into in the podcast episode. So if you're into sales, also on the very end of the episode, we dive into that a bit. We talked about management, her personal career journey, also what she did as an entrepreneur, and how she thinks about leadership. And at the end, we also had some funny conversations about who to cold outreach. So listen to the podcast and have fun.
Then you can build trust, and then you can spend less time communicating and more time just getting shit done.
Then I went home and thought about this sentence.
We basically put it on the table.
Hiring takes time. People are trained.
How to objectively judge certain situations.
It's very, 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 very hard to change things.
That was the learning.
Entrepreneurs with empathy.
To the people side.
Hey, Kata.
Hey, danke, Thomas.
Yeah, so love to have you on my show. So could you maybe tell us a bit more about who you are and what shaped you most?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. It's always tough to decide where to start when introducing yourself. So I would try to make it as sharp and crisp as possible. But there might be a few important milestones that matter. So I'm actually coming from the Black Forest. Black Forest area is, I would say, a special area in Germany, because the people there are very traditional, very conservative, very hardworking. And I think that shaped me a little bit, and my future career. Therefore, I think it's important to mention that. I was going to school. I did my A-level in Germany at a gymnasium here. But then I decided in the last years of before I finished my A-level that I would like to have some experience abroad. And I decided that maybe one good part to gain that experience would be doing an au pair ship in the USA. And that's what I did back then. So I applied. Excuse me?
In which location?
So two locations. So one of that was Northern Virginia, very close to Washington, D.C. And the other one, the second stop, was in Los Angeles. So yeah,
East
Pacific
side,
Palisades.
East Coast, West Coast.
East Coast, West Coast. So that was important for me, because I think also that speaks a little bit for me. I didn't want to go into the middle part, which would have been very traditional again. So the mid of the US is very, very traditional, very religious. And I said, I'm rather looking for, a little bit the more modern lifestyle. And that's why I decided for the coast. And they have been, again, very different. So I would say the Northern Virginia part and Washington, D.C. is very European. Los Angeles is something completely different. So that's just Los Angeles. I think it's
That's
hard to
also
describe.
unique, right? Do you also see it somewhere else in the world? Maybe not.
Yeah, no, that's very, I would say that's US. So when you think about the West Coast, that's what represents the USA for me. Whereas if you have the East Coast, it's very European influence. And I think it feels very much home, I would say. So it wasn't that big of a change, but Los Angeles was actually, yeah. So that's what I did. So I planned to stay there for 12 months as an au pair. And after those 12 months, I realized that I'm not done yet. So I extended that time and I started in Los Angeles again. But then I realized Los Angeles wasn't really me. I wasn't feeling, or I wasn't really adapting to the lifestyle there because it's complicated. Los Angeles is very large. You don't have a lot of people that you meet there because it's very distributed. And I mean, it's a special area, I would say. So people are also, they are open, but also a little bit freaky. And I think it was a little bit freaky, too freaky for me back then.
Do you have a story, a freaky story?
A freaky story. I think everything was freaky. I mean, people on the beach, when they are on the beach and they're just doing their runs in pajamas. And I've been a lot to Venice Beach because I think that was the thing that spoke for me the most about Los Angeles. But everybody that has been to Venice Beach knows that it's special, especially for me. I mean, I was 19. I think I was 19. Yeah, so I wasn't allowed to drink alcohol back then yet. And Los Angeles with 19 as a girl and being there by myself, it was special. And I wouldn't, or back then I didn't go out at night by myself or something like this. And all the other pairs that you could have met, we lived very distributed. So it took sometimes an hour to see somebody else where you could hang out with. And I think back then I just said, I've seen already 1 year on the East Coast. And I think I had another 3 months back then on the West Coast. And I said, I'm just done. I've seen a lot. I've made my experience and I really wanted to start studying back then and go back to Germany. And that's what I did. So after 15 months of being an au pair, I decided to go back to Germany and start studying. Yeah.
How did it shape you as a young person from the Schwarzwald in Germany to
a lot?
The big world?
A lot. I always say it was the best experience that I could have made and that I would wish my daughter to do one day or to have one day. I'm not sure if I will be strong enough to encourage her because, of course, I think I would be a little bit afraid, of course, also as a mother. But what I learned in the age of 19, 20 is being by myself and making decisions by myself in a completely foreign country, but nevertheless having some kind of a family over there that I could reach to if I would need support. And I think that was very helpful for me. On the other side, when I left Germany back then, I didn't know what I wanted to study after my A-level. So I had actually no idea. I think everything could have been possible. I could have become a teacher. I could have studied anything with advertisement. I was completely open. You could also say lost because I had no idea. And the time in the USA also helped me back then because what we had to do as an au pair is we had to go to college. So we had to do some classes there and gain some credits for the visa that we had, which was a student visa. And that helped me also a little bit just to figure out what I really wanted because I had a professor back then where I don't know what the class was called. I think it was international business or professional speech. I think it was professional speech. And I did some homeworks, and she was the one who said, I think you should do something with marketing. I completely see you in the marketing area. And based on that remark or hint, I went back to Germany and really started studying some kind of marketing. It was industrial engineering with a focus on marketing and sales. So I think that time shaped a lot of me. So first of all, I learned to speak English way better than I did it during the school time, but also it helped me realizing what I wanted to study. And so I had a clear plan when I came back, what I wanted to study. I applied, and it worked out well. So I directly got that place in the Black Forest again. So not too far from home, but also there I decided I don't want to move back. I moved into my own apartment and started studying in the Black Forest. Yeah.
And what did you study then?
So it's called product engineering. I think it was the coolest kind of studies that you could do. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to do marketing and sales, but marketing and sales in Germany wasn't really some kind of a study that you could do. It's different in the US, there you can really study marketing. What I then decided for is that product engineering, because I worked a lot while I was a child in the company of my uncle. He was producing parts for machines. And that was actually the part that I did there. So we studied how to produce smaller products and components for machines. And at the same time to follow the entire product life cycle. So from developing the product, from constructing the product, from producing the product to marketing, advertising the product, and selling the product. So it was an end-to-end product life cycle management studies that I did. And that was great because I think you learned a lot from the beginning of a product until the end of the product, which helped me along the way because you always had that broad view on how companies actually work.
And what came next?
What came next? So I had to do some internships back then. I did one, of course. I mean, I think you're meant to do that when you're young, and when you're studying something like this in Baden-Württemberg. Is I started, of course, at Daimler back then. So today, Mercedes-Benz. I think it was not an option. So you either did VW, or you went to Bosch, or you did it at Daimler, and I was going to Daimler, and I was working there 2 years as a working student and as an internship vocational student, and I did different things. So I started in the IT department. I also was in the educational department. Very interesting, but not yet what I wanted to do in life, to be honest. So I decided that I wouldn't want to stay there after my studies. So I went back to university. I finalized, I graduated. And then I started in that time already, I have to say. In Germany, we have something that is called, how do you call it in English? It's difficult to say. It's university companies. Is it right? It's hard to describe. So it's
where it's like a game.
And it's not like a game, but what you do is like you have groups that are coming together, and there you start advising companies as students. So you're a student, and companies pay for your advice based on that you're a young person that is studying, that can bring in new ideas and fresh ideas into an organization. And it starts with just a loose arrangement of young people coming together from the same university. And they build up this group, and then they reach out to companies to see if they can get jobs. And this is the first kind of being self-employed, I would say, that you can do during your studies.
I know that groups. I think it's really, really nice.
It's amazing. So I really have to say it was the best thing that could have happened for 2 reasons, I will tell you. And that was the thing that I did back then. And I was still during my studies. And what I started is based on the experience that I had gained in the US. In the US, when back then, they started using Facebook. So when I was in the US, it was 2007 when I started being an au pair. I started my first Facebook account in the States to stay in contact with the people here in Germany.
In case you like my show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it.
So I gained a lot of knowledge in regards to social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook back then. And when I moved back to Germany and I studied, I realized that I have more experience in that area that others have in Germany. And that's when I decided that I wanted to do some consulting in that area. And that's how I then started my first own company, where I consulted German companies on how to do professional social media marketing as a company.
Early adopter.
Early adopter, very early. So there were no influencers back then. There was no content marketing. It was very, very early. And back then, companies just started figuring out what they wanted to use it for. So do I use Facebook for services? Do I use Facebook to sell something? Do I use Facebook as a contact center? So there were a lot of questions, or rather as an employee engagement profile, or just to give random information about a company to the audience. So it was very, very open. But one fact that already started was conflict management, because what I realized is, of course, when you start such a profile openly, how do you act on conflicting responses that you receive? And that's what I did. So I trained them on how to build up such a profile, how to maintain such a profile, but also how to react to critical comments that you could receive in the best possible way. And back then I was 23. Yeah, 23 was the age of my first own company. And I just said there were two good things. So that was one of the good outcomes of that time. And the second one was I met my husband in that group, or in another group in another city, where we had that one meeting together. So I think that also shaped me a lot, that building up companies, founding companies was something that you somehow get used to, because when you have done that a first time, you know how to do it a second time and a third time. And I think that very much speaks for me and my husband. We have always been eager that when we had ideas, we just started to bring them to life and founded companies to see if they could be successful.
Yeah, later on you also founded a concept store.
Yes. That was during the time when I was on parental leave and I had too much time. I thought, why not? Yeah.
And also I saw a post yesterday. So today when we are recording, it's beginning of April, and you posted 10 years at SAP. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
10 years anniversary. That's a decade. Wow.
Yeah. Now you have to say, but you look very young.
You are. I would not even say but, I would say, and you look still very young.
You look still very young.
There's no but, I don't hear the but.
Yes. So also this, I never planned for it, to be honest. Like, what did I do, or how did I start working at SAP? I mentioned the social media marketing part, and that was something that really drove me, and I was very interested in that area and in that field. So after I finalized my studies, I, in a first step, started in a digital marketing agency as a social media consultant and project manager. Unfortunately, after I think half a year, I realized that it's not fulfilling me because the technology and everything in there wasn't progressing fast enough. So I got pretty easily bored because I didn't have the feeling that I could learn enough over the future years, which would have been important to me at that stage. And that's when I started looking around a little bit. I also did back at the time a part-time MBA. And during those studies, we had some SAP lectures, and it was still the old R3, so the really basic SAP system. And it was so complex. But exactly that complexity motivated me so much, because I thought,
That is so interesting, because some people just think, what the hell is going on here? And some who really like the challenge, they are really into it.
Yeah, I loved the challenge. I thought it's so complex. And being bored in that daily job and then seeing that very complex system, I thought, I will never get bored there. And that was my motivation and my intention to apply for a role. And really, it was luck. Like there was this traineeship being published in sales and pre-sales, which was very close to consulting customers. There was SAP, and I applied for it. And there was an assessment day, and I was very, very lucky that I got that position. And that's when I then also, of course, moved to Heidelberg out of the Black Forest. My husband, back then, not yet my husband, my boyfriend, he went with me, and we started here 10 years ago, completely new. But I haven't regretted it so far. So it was one of the best decisions that I did. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also SAP is a great place to be. And what I also really liked, also already the episode with Stefan Ries, where he talked about this reverse mentoring approach, where he always had mentees with him.
Yeah.
And sometimes after a big meeting or important meeting, debriefed with the mentee who just maybe started and asked, give me feedback. And when we had the briefing call, you also had a mentee with you. I love it.
Yes, I think that's important because I think that also speaks for the SAP culture. And that's what I loved the most from the beginning on, that in Germany, it's very different. Like they're very traditional companies where you speak to each other with the last name. And I think SAP is one of the first companies that we have in Germany which didn't do that. So being that huge company, they started very early that you just call each other by their first name. And that has always given that intimacy between people. And I think that also helped, shaping the whole culture. It's very open, very transparent. There has nothing or never ever been that situation, that, I'm older, I know more, and you just need to listen. It was always very much on eye level, no matter if you're just a trainee or if you're an assistant or if you're an executive. There is no, I'm more than you. It's rather everyone being on eye level, very respectful and very helpful also. And I think that's one of the things I appreciate the most at SAP, that it's, one big family and we support each other. And yeah, I love it.
I would like to understand if you know, or if you can still remember the difference of maybe the mentee program and so on at SAP when you 10 years ago was maybe a mentee and now a mentor. Yeah. So what's the difference, and how would you analyze the model?
I don't know if there has a lot changed. So one of the things that was always important is, and also that is a cultural thing, is we called it the Kaffee-Ecke. So you had to meet in the coffee corner. And coffee corner was one of the most important things about SAP because it was about networking. So one of my mentors back then always said, if you want to be successful in your role, you need to know people. And I think that speaks for SAP. SAP is a lot about knowing the right people because it's a large company. But if you know a lot of people, you will always have somebody supporting you when you need something. And I think that's something that I can, until today, even 10 years later, just, it applies still, because if you know people, and people then, of course, also move, they have different roles, but you can always reach out to them from a personal perspective and just ask them for advice or for support or for help. And I think that has been crucial to me and also my development within the organization, because the more people you know and the more you can ask people, of course, the better and the more efficient you get in your job. If you try to be successful by yourself within SAP, I think it's way harder. And I would even maybe say, I don't know if you actually can be successful if you're somehow such a lonely wolf, because that's not the concept how SAP works. From a mentorship, I think nothing has changed, to be honest. I think what we have, and I love it, is that there is a good relationship between very experienced employees and younger employees. And I still remember back then, my first mentor who asked me, I want to be your mentor. And I was like, oh, wow, really? And he was like, yes, I think we have that special connection. And I would just love to support your
That's so nice.
your journey
That's
at
so
SAP.
nice.
And that it was. So whenever there was an important milestone in my career, I reached out to him and I asked him, do you think that's the right step for me? Or do you think I should do it differently? And he was always, the biggest support for me. What happened then, of course, is you have more and more mentors. Not that they're all official mentors, but you start building up very good relationships and you meet people on the way, all with different backgrounds, and you just ask them for support and help and also advice during your career. And I think that's the same that we do today. So when I see young people, I offer them my support, and I have a lot of mentees because a lot of young females, of course, see me some kind of as a role model. And I say, if they ask me, I cannot say no, because that's what they need. And I know how important it is. So I try to support them as much as possible and answer a lot of their questions that they have. And also help them.
What I also see still with especially females, a lot of insecure overachievers. And I think they can be more confident. I see it all over again, and it's a pity.
Yeah, it is.
And when you now go 10 years back, what was the relationship that shaped you most in your journey? Because you had a very good career trajectory within SAP.
The relationship, I couldn't say it was one. So I always had the pleasure, and that's also something I just wrote in my posting yesterday that you just mentioned in regards to my anniversary. I was very lucky, I have to say, or it seems to me that I was very lucky, because every one of my managers was always amazing. They were all different, and they all had their their specialities on what they were good in. But I had the possibility to learn from each of them. And I think I was also back then, I was always the only girl between a lot of men. It was technical sales, so there were no men. It was just me and the assistant that were female. But I was always lucky enough that my managers never cared about it. So I never had the feeling, because I'm female, they wouldn't give me the same work, or they wouldn't see the potential that I have just because I would have a different gender. They were always very open, also in regards to, becoming a mom, all that. Like there was never that situation where I had the feeling, they don't see me as they see the males around me. So therefore, I have to say I was just very lucky, and I profited from all the relationships that I had with the different managers and the different styles of management they also had. Yeah.
So you would say to a young person that is now just starting in the career, build a lot of relationships and try to get the most out of it.
Yes, definitely. And see as much as possible. But into experiences, I think will come later. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe let's continue to understand more about your journey.
My journey. So I think I was always very ambitious. So I knew I wanted to have a career, and I think everybody did that exercise, with 30, I want to be a manager and I want to earn, I think back then it was 100K. That was always like the dream of everybody. And everybody said, when I'm 30, I want to earn that much money. And I don't know if I really followed that, but what was clear to me, I wanted to somehow make a career, and career back then for me was always management. And it started very early that I got the opportunity, even before I saw myself in a management role, to apply for a management role. So they asked me, there was an open position in sales, and they asked me if I would like to apply for it. Because they could see myself leading that team. And I applied for that role, and I didn't get that role. And I didn't get that role because they said, we could see you doing that role, but you're still very young. And I remember back then that I was, of course, very disappointed and very sad. And I didn't understand the world, because I thought, they asked me to apply for it, and then I applied for it and I didn't get the job. So it was hard to digest. But I always say it was the best thing that could have happened to me because, of course, it also then started a thinking process. And when you start once applying for a manager role, you will do that very likely more often. And that's what I did. I applied for various other manager roles in the coming years, and I never got those roles. So I was always, certain circumstances didn't work out. The team then decided to split up. So there were always reasons for it why I didn't get that manager role. I did then become a mommy, and I was then out of the office for about 6 months. And then I came back into a new role. And I was just happy doing that role. So I was working back then as somehow you can call it executive assistant for our regional COO. And I was just working for him. And I was so happy in that role. And I was not managing. But I was very, very happy in that role. And I felt very, very comfortable. It was a good level of learning a lot of things. But I didn't feel that need of now being a manager anymore. And exactly to that time, there was one team that lost their manager who decided to leave SAP for a new opportunity outside. And there was this team. And I back then had an idea on what the team could do in the future. And I worked out a proposal for the team. And I presented the proposal to my manager. And he said, well, yeah, that's exactly what we need. That's what we should do. Please apply for that role. And I was, of course, like, okay, applying again. And, what will happen again? I said, well, okay, well, I will apply, but it would be completely okay if I wouldn't get that role, because at that moment, it wasn't that important for me anymore to be a manager, because I just felt very satisfied in my role back then, because I had, from a content perspective, everything that I needed and what I wanted to do. So the need for being a manager wasn't there. And I got that role and I got the team. And that was then, I think, 5-6 years later, after the first application for a manager role, I became a manager, I think 5 years later. And then I was a manager. And it was at a time of point where it wasn't the most important thing for me. Yeah.
And now you're also one of the youngest COOs at SAP, I guess, right?
Yes. But there
Even
was
the youngest?
I think so. Yeah. At least for SAP Germany. So for the sales unit, there was nobody that was younger than me. Yeah. So I'm definitely the youngest now in the sales unit that we have in Germany. But what is also interesting in between, and I would love to mention that because that's something I also try to bring more into our organization, is I had that team, I was leading that team, and we use a lot of those agile methods where we will go back to. But there came also that moment where my former manager then decided to go into the next role, his next role. And then there was that question of, do I want to stay with my team being a manager, or do I want to move on with my back then manager and leave my team and leaving that managerial position? And I decided against the managerial position and decided to be, again, an individual contributor. And why did I do that? Because I thought, that's the next step for me, where I can learn things, where I can see new things, where I can develop myself. So I gave up that wholly, managerial position after 1 year and moved into an individual contributor position again. And I learned a lot back then again. And I think it was the completely right decision, because
what were the top learnings?
The top learnings for me was, it's so good to reflect back on if you really want to be a manager or not. Because usually it's you start in a managerial role and then you are a manager forever. And you never have that opportunity to step back again and decide if you really want to be a manager or not. And I think having that step back and decide, is that something that I would like to do or not in the future, was a very, very important step for me personally. And also to just reflect back on, how did I do it? How was I as a manager? Because I think you when you're in a manager role, you don't have time for that really, because you're permanently just managing, being there for everybody, caring for everybody.
And usually the calendar is full.
And the calendar is full, and taking that step back, I could reflect on myself a little bit. And if that's what I want to do, and what I realized now is that I love being a manager, but I also love not being a manager. So I enjoy both sides. And I think for me, the future is, it can be everything. So maybe a few years being a manager, and maybe then also a few years just being an individual contributor, and rather focusing on a topic and me, and then again on a team. And that career can be both, and not just the one thing, and that is managing people.
I also think that there is a difference between being a manager of individual contributors and being a manager of managers. And but the difference I see, especially with startups, is that with managing managers, you need to zoom out way more, and also need to be way more on a high level to talking about results and outcomes, and on an IC level, depending on how senior they are. You also need to guide way more. But of course, there are early stage managers who just do it the first time. And I think that's the toughest switch, to go from individual contributor first time to a manager, because all the principles that worked out to make you a high performer are not bringing you to success anymore.
And it's always depend also on the person that sits above you, in front of you, because there's sometimes very easy connections with people where it almost doesn't feel like managing, because there's just this connection, and you suddenly anyhow run into the same direction. And then there are people that are the very opposite of you, and you have different talking styles, and you need to learn about each other, and what is important for them and what is important for me. And I always say you need to find the same language, and finding that language just takes time and takes effort. And therefore it can be very easy if there's just this chemistry, and it can also be very difficult if it takes very long to find a common language then to work on in the future, and to jointly collaborate very good. I don't know if I would say there is a difference between individuals and teams. I think for me it's always the chemistry and the language. If the language is there, it's easy to work together. If the language is very different, it just takes time to get to the same language. And as often
with language, the whole communication style, or also the cultural indifferences?
The style of communication, because it's just different. Some people need more time. They rather expect you to explain what to do, and others are, you just give them a hint and they run away and just do what you think they should do, but without you really telling them. And also different people need different types of recognition. Some people don't need it. Some others need it very much. Some need a lot of collaboration. Some rather work for themselves. So it's all about people and working with people. And I think that's at least what I put a lot of effort in, to find that right collaboration model for each of my employees, and to really make it individual to their needs.
So how would you summarize your management style?
Very trustful, very open, and very supportive. So I try to be there as much as possible. When they need me, I take the time for them. I'm not directive, so I have clear expectations on the outcome, but for me it's open about how they get there. But I'm also there to support them if they feel not comfortable doing it themselves. So I step in, I guide, I support as much as I can. And I'm always also trustful, I said, but also very honest. So what comes way too less in today's workplaces is open feedback. Being always very respectful, but I think you can just grow if you get honest feedback. And sometimes that's something that I miss in corporates. There's a lot of, everything is great. But maybe it isn't great. And I think if it isn't great, you should sit together and give that honest feedback and have that open dialogue, because then everybody can work on it. It's also something that I always teach my team, also give me feedback, because I'm also not perfect, and I'm doing myself mistakes as well. I think nobody is perfect. But then we need to talk about it and make it better in the future. But it's just possible if people talk openly to each other.
Do you have an example where you had to give some hard feedback?
Yes. I would need to think about an example that I can share. I think maybe one from my first managerial role. There was somebody that saw himself as very experienced and very senior. And of course, there was this round about promotion and money, and there would have been easy ways for me to just, give him that raise and say everything is great. But I wouldn't have felt comfortable with it, because that wasn't my view on the results he delivered. And so what I did, I, of course, didn't give him that extra raise, but I kept it to that where I thought that's what I see his work like. And then, of course, I needed to have that conversation with him, because he, of course, asked, why didn't I get more? And I need to explain, because I have a different set of expectations towards him and his seniority, and that's not something we can work on. And of course, feedback like this in the first place is always hard, and that's something you need to digest, and it makes you sad. And I mean, that's the process. But then I'm also there to work with those people on how to make it better, because I really want to help them also in future positions where I will not be the manager, that they can perform to their best. And therefore, I think it's important to give that feedback. And that's what we did. So we then did regular meetings. I tried to help him figuring out, what is my expectation, what I would wish to have from him, and if what he's delivering is meeting that, or where we need to adjust it, and how I can help him also develop further by, for example, shadowing somebody. Or we did a lot of open talks where I ask him, when you compare yourself to the group of people in the team, where do you see your performance? And while we were having all those conversations, he also saw that there is a step to go for him. But having that very transparent, and also seeing him in comparison to the other team members, and making that very transparent to him, he saw where he needed to go and where he needed to work on. And I think that was helpful for him. For me, of course, in my first managerial role, it was quite challenging. But I always try to make it very respectful, very open, in the best interest also for him. And I think that's what he also felt. It's not about me holding him small, but rather me wanting to help him to become even better in the future.
Wow. And what is your current scope of management?
So my current scope of management is, it's a bit, we have a matrix organization, so it's a bit difficult to completely build the picture. But now I'm the COO and head of cloud transformation for our sales and service unit in Germany of SAP. We have about 2,500 employees in that unit, and I'm directly responsible for a team of about 100. But I'm responsible also for the entire organization as a COO. Therefore, it's a little bit a mixed setup. I see myself as the COO for the entire organization, but in my direct line, I have about 100 people.
How do you manage 100 people directly?
Not directly. So directly means of course, I have a few managers in between. Okay. So I have about 7 managers in my line, which distribute across the teams. Yeah, so I couldn't manage 100 myself. So I
was just thinking about.
Yeah, no, I have
a different model that I don't know.
No. So I have my core office, and I have an extended office of another 10, and the rest of it is pre-sales or customer advisory. So a very large team that focuses on the technical sales for our customers. And then there is the extended sales unit around it with the different industry sales and solution sales units.
Super interesting. I looked into the revenue numbers of last year. So it's, I think, for 30 billion in revenue globally, right? When I just have it, it's a lot.
But I cannot share the market unit data with you, unfortunately.
No, of course, not
Yeah.
for now. You're a public company, but everything what is
Yeah.
publicly out there, I can say, right? So because
Yes.
it's publicly out there. So it was
Yeah.
30 billion in
Yeah.
revenue. Then also, that's by the way, SAP website content, so it's not pulled out somewhere.
Good
30
remark.
billion, 13 billion out of EMEA. And I did not find a breakdown for how much is done in Germany, but I think Germany is quite a big market, isn't it?
Yes. We're worldwide the second largest market after North America.
Yes, and also when we look into LinkedIn, around plus 110,000 employees, 20,000, I think 21,000 out of the US and 20,000 out of Germany. And then you are managing 10% of Germany basically with these 2,500 people. So it's quite a lot.
Yeah. It's a large company and it's
impressive.
a large market, and it's It's sometimes you don't realize it really that much because you just work. At least that's me. You just work. But when you now mention it that way, it's we're the second largest market unit that we have within SAP.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's cool. Could you share a bit more how the whole people function in your unit is structured and what are the maybe functions or services they have?
I can. So within SAP Germany, so that's what we're called. So we have the big mother, which is the SAP SE, which is the corporate, and then we have in most of the countries, not every country worldwide, there's a specific segmentation behind it. We have sales offices or sales units. They're always under legal law in that country. For SAP, it's SAP Germany, SE, and Co. KG. And within that unit, we have, I would say, everything that is directly customer facing or working with customers. That is the direct sales, so account executives. That is pre-sales, so the technical sales, customer advisory. That is the consulting business, so the services that we have there. We have now also, since we are now more and more transforming into the cloud business, we have also the after sales functions. We call it the customer success partner or customer success manager, which help customers in the adoption and usage of cloud solutions. And then we have, of course, a lot of supporting functions for demand generation, for finance topics. We have a local CFO there who has, of course, a RefRec team, a commercial team. There are a lot of functions. We have demand generation, I mentioned. And I would say that's mainly it. So everything that you need in the process of selling solutions, making contracts, bringing those solutions to the customer via services, and also making customers adopt those solutions via the after-sales functions. So everything that comes when the product is produced or the product is developed, when it goes into the market, it comes to the market unit, and the market units are taking care of bringing that product into the market and to our customers and making sure that customers have every service that they need to also bring the product to life within their own organizations.
And it's also a product. Yeah, of course, that's core infrastructure for companies, right? I also saw on the website that around more than 90%, not that I say something wrong.
Customers are using SAP.
Yeah, more than 80% of the worldwide sales volume is generated from SAP customers. More than 87% of the world sales.
It's so funny because there is still, I think that's one of the funniest stories. Sometimes still people, when you meet them somewhere and they ask, where are you working? And you say SAP, and they're like, never heard of it. And that even happens in Germany. So the thing with SAP and SAP solutions is always that it's more in the back end. So very often as an end user, you don't really see SAP. You just see it in your work environment, or sometimes you already work with it, but you don't see it because it's applied to your corporate ID within a company. But all the back end, everything where you have enterprise resource planning processes is very often SAP. So at least in Germany and in the European market, SAP is very well extended in the market and used by our customers.
In case you have any feedback or anything you want to share with me, please send me an email on thomas@peoplewise.com or hit me up on LinkedIn. And in case you really enjoy the show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. It's also smart what you did. First, build an ERP software that nobody can replace, kind of. And the market is not growing that big, so maybe a few percent each year. But it's core and you don't exchange it. It's just there and going through. Based on Statista, I have an account there, so shout out to Statista. The ERP software market is projected to be at 100 billion in 2025. And now we are at around 96 billion. Yeah. So it's not that huge growth. But if you look at the IT sector, IT spending on enterprise software from 2009 to 2023, it's going from 220 billion up to 860 billion projected this year.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but it's the backbone of everything. I mean, starting your business, and I did my businesses, and as soon as you want to start to grow, you need an enterprise, an ERP system, because you need something where you can build up the entire process, where you can make sure you have the fulfillment, where you have the automation. Because if you don't have it, you will start, and that's what I did in my first company, is you start printing every DHL package sticker yourself. You work on every invoice yourself because there is no automated handover. You walk into with your invoice or with your order into the garage. You pick the product and then you go out there, and then you need to do everything manually again, typing in the address into the DHL fields. And I mean, just take that process and think about that being completely automized. And now think about scaling that, when you grow and bringing all that automation in there, paying invoices directly. That's amazing. And that's what you need. Like, there's no company that I could think of, growing and growing strongly without having an ERP system in the back end. And therefore, I think it's crucial to have that. And therefore, I think it's great that SAP is, the provider for ERP system, because it's one of the most essential things that you can have. Having a shop system is also important, but not as important and not as complex as the backbone that you have in the back end there.
And in sales, when you have so many people, do you also, I'm sure you have, I would like to understand, how are career trajectories of salespeople that maybe can start as an entry-level position and then work their way up through different roles? Is there a path you have designed or in mind, or is there a pattern that you say, okay, these are usually the people who start and then end up at a certain function?
It always depends on a person, I have to say, because there are a lot of ways within SAP. There's, of course, a very traditional path. You start as a junior account executive, you then become an account executive, senior account executive, where you just move up, in one role, where you just always work with the customer as an account manager. There's also that upper level, which is like a global account director, where you then just not work within one country, but across countries for companies that are international, which might add another level to it. But you're always focused on specific accounts across our portfolio. What we also have is we have sales roles, and that was the sales role that I did, where you focus on special components of the SAP portfolio. Back then, for me, it was, for example, our finance solutions. So I was always going out to customers with a little bit more technical knowledge on our finance solutions and advising them on the best finance solutions for their company and for their current challenges that they're facing. In addition, there's the technical role in sales, the pre-sales or customer advisory, where people rather work on presenting the solutions, building up demo scenarios for the customer, which are very clear or very close to their processes, so they better understand the advantages of those solutions. We also have something that's called value engineering, where people or our employees work on business cases for customers, on value propositions for our customers. We also have architects, which work more across, which build up large architectures for customers, technical architectures, business architectures. So I think there are a lot of roles that we have, and I think a lot of possibilities also for people to develop themselves in. And I think that's also one of the recommendations that I would do, or which has helped me a lot, is going a little bit from the left to the right, not just doing that straight upwards, but rather looking into the different roles and what the roles are capable of doing, and learning those components for yourself, because that will give you, of course, in the future, a very wide profile that you can use for more managerial roles, instead of just being in that one role and going directly to the upper level. But it depends on the person. There are also people who say, account executive is exactly my job and I want to do that forever. And I would say, well, that's great and you should do that. But I think there's also the flexibility to go a little bit left and right, and a lot of possibilities to see a lot.
Yeah, nice. I think selling a solution like SAP is not easy, right? Because you need adaptation. And if you don't have the adaptation, then, okay, you maybe have the logo, but it's not activated, and then there is no retention or no further adoption, then you don't have the recurring revenues, and you need them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things when you sell something, it should have a good value for the customer. You should be able to help the customer to get onboarded on that solution as best as possible, because then they start also creating that value. They will adopt it more, which will, of course, and I think that's not a secret, also help, drive continuous revenue streams for us. Which I think is a win-win for both sides, because if a customer is happy with the solution, he's capable of doing the best for his company. And of course, for SAP, we have good revenue streams that are very predictable, which also helps building the future business for us with new innovations.
And I also read on the website, 92% retention of employees, very strong, especially in a software company that is still fast growing. And secondly, 99 out of 100 biggest companies are already SAP customers. Who is this one customer that is this one big company that is not a customer? Do you know?
It's a good question. I would say maybe one of our competitors, but
Salesforce.
Maybe I don't know, but it could be. And in regards to retention, yes, it is. I mean, I never planned to stay with SAP for 10 years. When I started back then, I said, I will be here 2 years, because I think that was normal, that after studies you said, did you do the same? Did you say, your first job you will do 2 years and then you will do the next? No. I don't know. I thought that was common, that everybody did that, 2 years and then you will do the next job.
Yeah.
And so I only plan to stay with SAP 2 years, and now it's 10. I think that speaks for itself. So,
and also the median employee tenure based on LinkedIn says 6.3 years. That's long.
Yeah.
But I think if there is also growth, but if there's also growth, why changing, right?
Yeah. And I think that's always something I like. I think we have the right values at SAP. That was something that always spoke to me, that SAP has strong values that I always believed in and that I could follow. And the second thing is, we're so innovative. So as said in the beginning, I wanted something where I didn't get bored. And I think there wasn't one day at SAP where I was bored, because there's always new technology. new developments. We are in a transformation. Things are changing. And therefore, there was not this day where I said, what am I doing next? Because it was always clear that there is something to do where I could step in and help and develop things. So yeah, there was no reason to actually change that.
And what's the importance for you in hiring?
In hiring, for me personally, I started a few years to get a little bit into the topic of now I said it and now I'm not remembering growth mindset. I try to hire for people where I see the need, or they're eager to develop themselves and to learn, because I think that's something that is important for an organization at SAP, because we are a company that is constantly changing. And I think you need people that somehow can handle that constant change and that constant innovation. And I think people with a growth mindset are a very good fit to how we as an organization are running. And that's something I always look for in people, that people are, that they have that growth mindset. They want to grow, they want to challenge things, they want to bring in ideas. They're not the ones who, want to do their job A to Z always the same, but that can work and live in an environment that gives a lot of freedom. But I think you also need to be able to use that freedom for yourself. And I think for people that do not have that growth mindset, it can maybe sometimes be very overwhelming and very loose. And therefore, I think that is a good fit for us, people with a growth mindset.
Nice. And what's next for you?
There is no next for the moment. So, of course, you always think about that. And I get that question also a lot. But I have to say, I'm very happy with the role that I have. And I have enough challenges that keep me busy. And
I can imagine.
and I think that's also important, that you start living in the moment and not always looking for the next thing. And I think that role is huge, and it's a great opportunity. And as we mentioned, I got that role very, very young, or in early age. And of course, I want to do my best to also prove that it was a good decision to bring me into that role. And therefore, I'm not in a hurry. I also realized that, you need some time to get into a role.
Yeah.
That role has to do a lot with change, and change is not done within a year or within 2 years. Change needs time. And therefore, I just enjoy the moment. I enjoy developing that organization into the future, and it will take time. And therefore, I just take the time that I have in that role. And I'm not on a hurry. I guess I will do it. Now I'm in that role a year. I guess there are another 2, 3, 4 years that I will do that role, and I'm looking forward to it.
It's a complex role, and I think you can shape a lot.
Yeah.
And Kata, do you know somebody, what I don't know, who I should interview on the show?
Somebody you should interview. I mean, there's one person that I'm currently a big fan of, but he's not coming from a corporate. It's Professor Dr. Rosa. Mm-hmm. He talks about, so he has written a book. It's called Unverfügbarkeit, being unavailable. And he also talks about going into resonance with something, and going, what that means, and what people need in their work life. And it's very interesting. And I love listening to him, and I think he has great approaches. And I also love sometimes, next to the corporate life and the work life, having a little bit more that view on what literature says and what science says about that. So I think he would be a very interesting talking partner for you.
And do you know him, or do you just follow him?
No, I followed him. So I had him, or I listened to him on one of the podcasts from the DFB Academy. They do a leadership podcast, and he was a guest there, and I could just have listened to him, I guess, for hours. And I'm now currently trying to get in contact with him, because I want to win him as a speaker for an SAP event, because I think it's very interesting what he's talking about. But no, I'm not there yet. So I have to approach him.
My next question would be, could you make an intro? But otherwise, let me also do a cold outreach, because we also do this sometimes all the time. This is also how we met, right? I just texted you.
Yeah.
And,
I can do that for the both of us.
Yeah, let's try it. And you do your approach, I do my approach, and then we see who is successful, maybe both. And then if I maybe can make it, I introduce him to you.
Very good. That's what we do. Let's see who's most successful. No, I think that's somebody that's very interesting to talk to. And maybe another one, but I would need to look up his name again, because his name is Greek and he's doing something completely different. But I had the possibility to join a seminar of him a few weeks ago on charisma. He has a very good TED talk on how charisma is influencing and why leaders need charisma. Antonakis is, I think, his last name.
I like it now, a bit of some tasks for cold outbound.
But he's very cool. It's so interesting to learn about charisma and how important charisma, John Antonakis is his name, about how important charisma is. And he talks about why all those politicians that have been successful because they have that kind of charisma. And that's also something you can work with and gain more. And it's very interesting. So, and also there are a lot of data and a lot of science behind it, why it is the way it is and how they proved it. So very interesting topic. Yeah.
That's also funny, because usually it's also that I don't have some tasks from it, because I get intros when I ask these questions. Now I get more tasks, but I'm totally fine with it. I like
Sorry. But I think some professors, I mean, I studied, but I didn't like studying that much back then. But now when you're a little bit more senior, you also realize how interesting science can be, and, going a little bit into that direction and also learning from science and not just, what we talk about out of our experiences as managers.
Yeah, I love it already. I will reach out to both of them and keep you up to date.
Good luck.
Do you have any final words?
I love talking to you. So thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy that you did that cold reach out. I think you're a good salesperson. So maybe we need to consider that in the future. If you're interested in SAP, we can have a chat. No, I very much like the interview with you and giving you some insight. I hope I could share a little bit about how my way went and how my career developed. I think the most important thing is there's not that one kind of a career. There are different paths to career. Having a career can be managerial, cannot be managerial. It's open to everyone and what they want to do. And I think also about leading people, the most important topic for me is being honest, like having that honest relationship to a person is the best way of leadership, because I think being honest to somebody also shows that you're caring about them and that you really want to help them grow. And I think that's the biggest thing you can do as a manager, giving that honest feedback to employees and help them grow. So those would be the two things that I would maybe give to the audience as a takeaway if they think about stepping into a managerial role, or if they're already in a managerial role, on what they can and should maybe do, to feel good in that role and to be successful.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks for being
here. Good luck. I'm looking forward to hear from you and your outreaches.